Good day or evening to those of you who might be watching on YouTube or listening. Thank you. And again, delighted to be able to be here in my usual role as the chapel presider. Magic Mountain here in this historic offering on this historic place for this unbelievably urgent purpose. And I was welcoming those of you who are new to the chapel context. This is something that I inherited from my predecessor, Father Bill Holtberg, who developed the service, I think now it's fair to say more than 40 years ago. And at the time at which he was the regular presider, it did have a structure, but it was maybe less structured than I have sought to make it. One of the few elements of structure that I have brought is a sequence of topics. And so this morning, I know you're going to be excited to hear a discussion of the theme of suffering. A dubious joy, but an important topic in theology and just generally. Buddhism, the famous, more popular psychological writer M. Scott Peck, and Hinduism, Christianity, religions of the East and the West, and thinkers of the nature of human experience have long pointed out that suffering is a part of what it is to be, and reflected for us and with us on one of the great challenges of suffering, which is what is the role of the divine? Is there a divine presence that can be claimed in the midst of the tragedies of human experience? And I'm sad to disappoint up front, but I'm not going to solve all of the eternal problems of this. Addiction is a context, cause, and consequence of suffering. It's a place where suffering occurs. It's a cause that hurts people, and some people find refuge in substance use disorder or other ways that addiction manifests out of the flight from suffering's experience. So it's a legit topic for the morning, and it is a challenging one. One of the things that I've come to appreciate, and I don't know that I understood it quite the same as I do perhaps now after a number of years in pastoral ministry and chaplaincy. My road into that was drug addiction, but also a cynical, sarcastic atheism. So at one time that was me. I was kind of dark and bitter and non-believing, and that was a hard place to be. I had to be wooed into the idea that faith could be a part of my life, and it's the great work of people in recovery that helped me as a newcomer reach out, that got me to be a person who stands here in front of you with clergy garb on, which many of my old friends would think was weird. And like, really, Jack? But the insight that I was about to share is that I have come to realize that suffering is not evenly doled out, that some people experience much worse suffering than others. And I wanted it to not be that. I sort of wanted to believe if there was somebody I met that had less suffering, that they were going to get theirs, eventually, or that if I had experienced a ton of suffering already, that maybe I was going to get a pass because I had already filled my bucket, but or emptied, if you know that reference, my bucket. But suffering just doesn't behave that way. It comes unbidden into the lives of human beings in kind of weirdly random high or low quantity. And one of the challenges also that I found, and it's one of the reasons why this gets really tricky, is that if you look in various wisdom traditions to think about suffering, you find this portrayal of enemies and followers, right? So the enemies are bad and the followers, God on their side, ask God to help them smite, whatever, not smooth, but anyway, vanquish the and in the sense of justice. But, you know, I think as an interfaith chaplain, and today in our public sphere, if you look at Ukraine or the Middle East, for the whole time we've watched the Middle East, those of us who lived long, it's thousands of years that those conflicts have persisted, or more recently in our nation's capital. What becomes super evident is that one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. And so it gets dicey because you could be choosing the wrong side, as it were. And this has always troubled me about the scriptures that are in the tradition in which I'm ordained, because there's a lot of this, like, go get the enemies, and God, you've been good to me because I follow you. I don't know, it just causes me to pull back from this whole subject area. But one of the reasons why I'm not going to do that and just quit here is that addiction is not one of these places where the relativism needs to get in the way. I think there is a clear foe here, and it's not the person with the wristband. That's one of the really important things that we at Caron have helped many people move past, is the idea that addiction is the manifestation of bad moral character, and that we, I'll put myself in that club, are just jerks who cause the harm that is experienced in our and other people's lives out of some wanton disregard for the hurts that will come. I just don't believe that. I've been entirely persuaded that the blame here rests on an illness and not on so the perpetrator-victim thing is one in which we have an illness that is the perpetrator, and we have a wide class of victims. And sadly, if you're in my blast zone and I'm still drinking, you probably look at me as a perpetrator, but I'm a instrumental perpetrator. My actions hurt you, but something else is driving my action. And so that can be really helpful. And so I think that's important. I think we are in a context of suffering, and we know who the bad guy is, and it's not a guy, it's a thing. And so the adversary against which we find ourselves opposed is this ethereal thing. And it's not, it's not even a fuzzy thing. Like one of my snarky little lines is when I hear a patient sort of saying, well, I don't know if I'm really addicted. I'm like, so you're a social crack user. And even the happy alcoholic, because if you are indeed happy and you're wondering whether you're alcoholic or not, there's actually a set of criteria. And so those people who are in the room who are wearing the wristband and using insurance have been measured against a set of criteria. And the criteria are actually, I thought about this week, I never thought about it this way, but the criteria are measures of harm. So harm to yourself and harm to others, and harm to the body, the mind, the soul, the humanity, all that sort of thing. You lose your values, have you lost your job, have you hurt your family, those are and so you can't qualify for an addiction diagnosis and say, Dr. Phil's question is working for me. It doesn't work. There are plenty of people who can drink and can use certain drugs seemingly, quote, successfully, but we would define them as not addicted because the harm is not there. So when use becomes suffering-inducing, that's when it's problematic. And use tends to become suffering-inducing when it gets out of control, and when it gets out of control, it becomes this illness that's become very hard to really respond to. So one other thing that is all a new approach to this topic, which I'm grateful for sometimes when I have new things to say, but another thing that bothered me earlier in the week was I remember a discussion that's come out lately about the way that people in the public sphere, in the context of suffering, have been challenged, because the typical response used to be from authority, our thoughts and prayers are with you. And I don't know if you're following the news, but today, in the aftermath of hundreds and hundreds of mass shootings, and also the continuing devastation of our planet due to climate change, people who are climate activists and people who are persons struggling with the reality of mass shootings have challenged the voices of people in power who are saying our thoughts and prayers are with you. Like, that's not enough. Like, thoughts and prayers are nice, thanks, but what are you doing is the question. And here I am, I'm a person who's become persuaded that prayers have a place in my life and in human life generally. And I love what prayer does. Some of it mystery, but a tremendous amount of it very evident. If you have not put prayer in your world, I would strongly encourage you to attempt it, because there are just the testimony of centuries and across different wisdom traditions, and many people who don't even know who or what they're praying to or why, but will tell you that as they began to integrate prayer into their life, that change occurred, at least in them. But I don't think prayer is enough to make meaning out of suffering. And I learned a term in seminary a long time ago, redemptive suffering. And it's a term I had to think a lot about, because it didn't make sense to me at first. And the way it was taught to me had to do with the narratives of the Christian tradition and the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and how this portrayal of the divine, allowing the divine to be and suffer and die, that others might have some kind of rescue, was the thing that I was being taught about. And so, to stay on track a little bit, what I think we have an opportunity to do is to act in the face of the suffering that calls us into this room. And that action makes more of a difference than mere thought and prayers. And I'd like to just talk about 3 kinds of action and see if my brain, which has been all over the place trying to get ready for this morning, has things to say about each one. First of all, prevention. We can stop addictions, suffering in individuals and families. A person who's addicted, we can help into abstinence and future what's called sobriety, which is really good news. And we've learned that we can do that with remarkable effectiveness and success. The measures of outcomes that come from good treatment far outpace the measures of good outcomes for many chronic illnesses like high blood pressure, diabetic issues, and all those sort of things. So, and this was often misunderstood because of stigma. But today we know, because when you use similar measures that they use for hypertension or sugar-related illness or those kinds of things, addiction recovery with good treatment gets better outcomes. People can and do recover, and that stops it, right? That's then it's either arresting ongoing suffering, or it's preventing future suffering, or both, and that is meaningful because the ultimate suffering, it's fair to say that one of the really truly dismal forms of suffering that happens here is death. And people die from this illness in very significant numbers. And beyond the deaths, I often like to say divorces, families break up, jobs are lost, livers implode, brains start getting less this is a disease that exacts tremendous toll, not only on the sufferer, him or herself, but on those who seek to be in relationship with that person. And we did just open up a partial hospitalization program on this campus with separate housing so that we can help people on this campus for longer than the 28-day stay. And the reason I mention it is that in that building where the housing is taking place, there's a beautiful lounge and a fireplace. And over the fireplace, those of you who are new to the PhD program, go when you go back and read the plaque over the fireplace. It was placed there by a family that lost 2 children, 2 boys, to overdose. I mean, I can't even imagine what I would do if one of those losses occurred. But they had to bury 2 boys. First of all, would they want to have had that stopped? Oh my God! And their plaque is there because they have given to Caron so that we can help stop. And I will tell you, when that family communicates on occasion as they do, I tell them about the meaningfulness of their gift and how our outcomes are making a difference, and that it's quite possible that their tragedy has meaning because they are now contributing to the prevention of the death of others. Later on in the service, we're going to have a reading that comes from a Buddhist meditation on suffering. And it outlines these 3 things, so I'm not claiming to be original here, borrowing from this form of prayer. And yeah, Buddhists do pray. The meditation, the prayerful meditation, is that one would seek to eliminate suffering where possible, and then also that we would reduce suffering if possible. And that's another kind of meaningful action. My hope is that you will feel empowered by the things that I have to say today. And that you will not feel that powerlessness and despair and helplessness which can attend some forms of suffering. There are some sufferings that are just gotta figure out how to roll with it. But this is not that. And we can prevent and stop, and we can also reduce. We can, and one of my friends and colleagues in ministry is a UCC pastor in the great city of New York. Her name is Erica Pollitt. Shout out to Erica. And she is a unique being, and she has dedicated her life, having had the experience of this kind of struggle and finding her own path into wellness, to trying to teach churches and other frontline settings about how to extend hospitality, because in things like needle exchanges, safe injection sites, and that sort of stuff, which may make some of your blood boil, and Narcan. She does all kinds of training and facilitating to help people be equipped to love. And one of the things that Erica says, which I have it in a bookmark in a book I'm reading right now, is God loves people who use drugs. I think it's an important line. And I think it's a really powerful reminder to the church writ large, synagogues and all that stuff, that have through centuries now scandalized people who are loved by God. And it's in any way that we can reduce the suffering, we're diminishing this thing that has hurt us and others for so many years in so many ways. But finally, I think there is this is the one choice that exists, I think, in basically all suffering, and is accompaniment. We can, where we cannot reduce and where we cannot eliminate, we can be authentically present in loving solidarity with people who are struggling. And that does make a difference. It's a meaningful act. This is Mother Teresa going to Calcutta. This is my sister in missionary presence in Guatemala right now. She just got there on Saturday, and she'll spend the next 6 months down there just feeding kids and helping people. And it's a beautiful thing that my sister does. Even if you're listening, I love you. Is that enough? Well, it may be all we can do. One of the things that is happening in this room today is that there's a good number of people that are wearing these little paper name badges, and that tells me that you came here for that very purpose, out of some degree of solidarity with a person who's here with a wristband. And I salute you. I honor that you have made a decision to be present and perhaps to engage in courageous conversation and to ask difficult questions and to seek to forge some sort of next steps for one another in the face of suffering that may not be able to really be, you surely cannot eliminate it out in the world, right? This addiction thing has been and it will continue. But the most meaningful thing that I know that we can do are the three things I talked about. We can stop it on a case-by-case basis. We can help where we cannot eliminate, and we can love where we cannot reduce or eliminate. And we are weirdly blessed that this is the suffering that we are facing here, because there are sufferings that don't offer these kind of options, at least the first two. So, a call to action. One of the things I love doing in working with families is being reminded that here at Caron, there's a kind of a guide stick for family members to decide. If you're a family member and you have a loving relationship with someone who's addicted, or it's getting, like, you still love them, right? You're still in it. And they call you and they want money, or I don't want to go to this, or I want to, or I still need the car, or whatever. And this happens all day long because that's the nature of this thing. And you're tired because you feel like you've been played 1,000 times. But the way you've been played before is you're afraid if you don't pay the rent, or if you don't wash the clothes, or if you don't do the thing, then you're going to be in the darkest outcome that you could possibly imagine. And then you feel manipulated because the person who's addicted is using their knowledge that you feel that way. So it's like, and people come to Caron. One of the things, if you're on the white plastic name badge thing, you're going to learn is that one of the things that can be really helpful is this guide, which is make the decision to help when you can make a claim that the help is supporting recovery. And stop if you can't. It's a dangerous thing to make a decision to stop. But this is similarly, this is what I want to say, is in the face of suffering, the decisions that we make, we should be making if they stop or reduce harm. And we should be very conscious of whether what we're doing is likely to increase harm. It's a helpful guide. So in this curious thing called life, where there's very little black and white, I don't mean it in a racial way, but I mean there's very little clear decision making to be had. The older you get, the more I think why wisdom comes upon us to realize that those are the problems. And enemies look like friends, and friends look like enemies to different people. We face an adversary that is medical and neurobiological rather than individual, and you're here to help, and I really appreciate that, and I think it's meaningful. May God bless you in this work.